We're going to do the first 3 sections of Chapter 2 in 2 parts. The first section will be Section 2.1 and Section 2.3, and this is Part 1. Our goal for this section is to write conditional statements. A conditional statement is a 2-part statement, and as we write these, they're going to be in what's called if-then form. Things like, if it is raining, then the grass is wet. Or if 2x plus 5 equals 11, then x equals 3. Or things like if P, then Q. In this 2-part sentence, the if part is called the hypothesis. The then is the conclusion. So the first set of examples we're going to do is we're going to identify the hypothesis, the if part, and the conclusion, the then. Underline the hypothesis once and the conclusion twice. Number 1, if today is Monday, then tomorrow is Tuesday. Your hypothesis is the part that goes with the if. So today is Monday, we're going to underline once. The conclusion is the part with the then. Then I can conclude that tomorrow is Tuesday. So we're going to underline that twice. Example 2. If 5x minus 3 equals 2x plus 9, my hypothesis, the if, is 5x minus 3 equals 2x plus 9. The conclusion, the then, the thing I conclude is that x equals 4. You do not need to underline the words if and then, just the hypothesis and the conclusion. Example 3 is an if-then statement, but it's written using notation rather than writing the sentence out. The first part is the hypothesis. The arrow is read implies, and the second part is the conclusion. So this is A implies Q. It's like saying if A, then Q. So when you see this notation, A implies Q, the first part is your hypothesis. We'll underline that once. The second part behind the arrow is the conclusion. We'll underline that twice. When using the notation, the arrow always points to the right. It does not change, and it does not ever have symbols drawn through it. It remains exactly the same. We're going to form some new statements using these if-then sentences. The first thing we're going to do is write the negation. So we're going to write the opposite point of view for the given sentence. Here's our examples of negation. Number 1 says it is raining. To negate this, we're going to write the opposite of it. So if I negate this, my answer would be, it is not raining. Negating puts in the word not or takes it out. Number 2 says today is not Friday. To negate this, we'll simply remove the word not. Today is Friday. Number 3, it gives an equation, 3x plus 5 equals 14. To negate this, we would do 3x plus 5 does not equal 14. So I'm going to write the equation, 3x plus 5 does not equal. To negate an equal sign, we draw the equal sign and put a slash through it. This negates a math symbol. So 3x plus 5 does not equal 14. The next 2 examples use the notation. What we're going to do is we're going to negate the symbol. To negate the letter, we're going to write the symbol for negation in front of it. The symbol for negation is a squiggle. It looks like a tilde if you take Spanish. So we're going to write not P. Looking at number 5, that means this example would be read not A. To negate not A, we'll take the symbol away and just write A. So you're writing the opposite. There are three other kinds of sentences we can form using negation, so we're going to do some examples. Now, we're going to start with a conditional statement. You will always be given an if-then statement. So our statement is, if it is raining, then the grass is wet. We're going to do three types of sentences using this conditional statement. You will need to write this down as a conditional statement. The statement we start with, if it is raining, then the grass is wet. Then we're going to form what's called a converse. To form the converse, you always leave the if and then where they are. The converse exchanges the hypothesis and the conclusion. It flip-flops them. So if we're finding the converse of if it is raining, then the grass is wet, we're going to write if, and we're going to put the conclusion up front. So if the grass is wet, then it is raining. The hypothesis goes to the back. So we're switching the words that were with the if with the words that were with the then. Okay, we'll go back to our conditional statement and we'll form a new sentence. Now remember, your conditional statement, if it is raining, then the grass is wet. Now we're going to form what's called the inverse. We're going to write the negation of the hypothesis and the negation of the conclusion. The inverse keeps the hypothesis and conclusion in the same order, but simply negates them. So we want to do the inverse for if it is raining, then the grass is wet. I'm going to negate the first part. Instead of if it is raining, we're going to say if it is not raining. Then, and we'll also negate the conclusion. Our conclusion was the grass is wet. To negate this, we're going to say the grass is not wet. That's the inverse. The third sentence we're going to form using our conditional statement, if it is raining, then the grass is wet, is called a contrapositive. The contrapositive, the largest word of the three we're going to discuss, does both. Biggest word does the most. You're going to do both things. You're going to take your original sentence, you're going to exchange the hypothesis and the conclusion, and negate both. So let's look at our conditional statement. If it is raining, then the grass is wet. To form the contrapositive, we're going to switch the hypothesis and the conclusion and negate both. So instead of the grass is wet being at the end, we're going to say if, and negate it, the grass is not wet. Then we're going to go back and get our hypothesis. Our hypothesis was if it is raining. So we're going to say then it is not raining. Couple of precautions you need to take when you write these sentences, and it will sound silly until it happens. A lot of times when people write these sentences, the word then loses the N and they end up writing the word the. You must have the word if and the word then in the correct place in your sentence for these to be counted correct. So our conditional statement was if it is raining, then the grass is wet. The converse switches the hypothesis and the conclusion. If the grass is wet, then it is raining. The inverse keeps the order but negates. If it is not raining, then the grass is not wet. Our contrapositive does both. If the grass is not wet, then it is not raining. These sentences are essential for doing some of the things we're going to discuss with our theorems that we'll be using. Okay, let's try a couple more. For these examples, we're asked to write the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. Number 1, our conditional statement, the statement we start with, if today is Tuesday, then tomorrow is Wednesday. We're going to start with the converse. Be aware they will not always be in this order that we're currently practicing these sentences in. I'm going to keep them in the same order that we started with for the notes, just for good practice. However, they will be switched on worksheets and definitely on your test. You need to know which form you're creating, whether you're supposed to negate or switch the order, which one's converse, inverse, and contrapositive. The converse of this, we're going to flip-flop. We're going to switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. So if tomorrow is Wednesday, then today is Tuesday. And make sure you keep the words that are there. Don't change it. The inverse goes back to our first conditional statement, and it negates both parts but keeps the order. So instead of if today is Tuesday, we're going to say if today is not Tuesday. Then, instead of tomorrow is Wednesday, we're going to say tomorrow is not Wednesday. And again, I'm not going to change the wording. I'm not going to say anything about Thursday or Friday or Monday. I was given Tuesday and Wednesday. I need to keep those words. Contrapositive takes the original conditional statement and does both. So if, you're going to bring the conclusion up front and negate it. If tomorrow is not Wednesday, then, and you're going to take your hypothesis, put it in the back, and negate it. Then today is not Tuesday. Take a moment and look at how these sentences are formed. Example 2. Now we're going to start doing some math with the sentences. If 2x equals 8, then x equals 4. Again, I'm going to leave if and then right where they are. To form the converse, I'm going to switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. So if x equals 4, then 2x equals 8. To form the inverse, I'm going to keep the original order but negate both parts. So instead of if 2x equals 8, if 2x does not equal 8, put a slash through it, then, and make sure it has the n, x does not equal 4. Contrapositive, largest word does the most, we're going to do both. So I'm going to take the back conclusion and put it up front and negate it. If x does not equal 4, then hypothesis goes to the back and is negated. 2x does not equal 8. Let's try one with the notation. Remember that to negate, you either put in this negation sign, the squiggle, or you take it out. The arrow always points to the right. The hypothesis to start is the front thing, A, and our conclusion is not B. The converse switches the hypothesis and the conclusion. So the converse of this top conditional statement, A implies not B, would say not B implies A. We're going to go back to our conditional, our original statement, and write the inverse. The inverse keeps the order but negates. So I'm going to say not A, squiggle A, implies, and we're going to remove the not and say B. Not A implies B. Contrapositive does both, so I'm going to take the not B, put it up front, and negate. B implies, hypothesis goes to the back and is negated, not A. Our homework that we'll work on in a class is handout 1C and handout 2A, discussing these first few sections, 1.6 and 2.1, 2.3.